Hello everyone, we're here back again. This isn't my BBFC VMPA podcast I do with my friend Rob, nor is it a play that I recently did called The Hypocrite for the Garlands Theatre nearby Canterbury. But we're going to be talking about the show that is one of my favourites of all time, except for The Simpsons and Dexter's Lab, that helped inspire my music namesake, and also made me love anime even more outside of Daft Punk. We're going to be talking about the 25th anniversary of XL Saga, which grammatically incorrect because it should be Excel's Saga, but that's another story. And here we have a special guest that we did the Elf and Lead podcast with is Ross Locksley.
Hello, thanks for having me back. Obviously didn't do too badly last time and you still have viewers, so I'm grateful for that at least. And, always nice to chat to you about anime I have to massively refresh my memory on.
Oh, no worries there. I'm just happy for a lot of the nostalgic type titles. I know for you, you're of the earlier generation. You're probably like Generation X.
I am. For my sins, I'll be 46 in about a week's time. So,
oh, well, you've experienced the OGs. You were there when like Akira and Ghost in the Shell were big business.
Yeah, I was about 13 when they landed. So, yeah, I was just old enough to sneak in to watch them. Or at least get it on VHS and watch it at home in private, not get arrested. So yes, it's. I sort of watched it. I'm slightly the youngest of our generation of anime fans. It's quite weird because I used to feel like I was always the youngest guy in the room. Now I'm the oldest. So for the reason I don't go to too many conventions these days, I feel so out of place. Got all these kids running around in cosplay and stuff, and then you got me turning up. Might as well have a cane and a long beard at this point. But it's lovely to see it. And when you talk about stuff like XL Saga, which we always think of like wave 2 of anime coming into the country. So you're like the second generation of anime fan that we'd established that it could sell in the UK, and then they just started experimenting with all sorts of stuff, which leads to things like Elf and Lead and XL Saga, or XL Saga if you want to be entirely correct. I always thought she'd be like a cross saga because she's just like a henchwoman. It's it's like, why isn't it the name of the organisation or Bill Palazzo or the guy that's running it? But no, it's XL Saga. I think it was just because they had a sexy woman on the front. That's all it was. And it worked too.
Oh no, you're tapping into a dark part of my psyche. Oh no, Mark, here he goes again. It's the reason why I got into anime more or less, because I was a horny teenager obsessed with these sort of inappropriate cartoons from Japan. And
that's most people got into it, to be honest, even the girls.
Well, of course there. I mean, I had a major crush on XL and High, the two main characters from it, who one of them kept vomiting and passing out because she had was anemic. And then there was Misaki.
Yeah.
She had the red hair. And then the Ropponmatsu Unit 1, she was the one with the short purple hair.
That's right.
I believe everything is ready now.
What's ready?
I do not know, but Mr. Kabapoo's orders clearly say...
Kabapoo's?
That is correct. Now would you lie down, please?
Right. There was a second unit that came along later, but they were the city guards, weren't they, under the... what was the guy's name? Was it Goji Shioji?
Yeah, he was that weirdo. I don't know the name of the character in question. I know the Kabapu character with the sunshades and the
That's right.
weird green hair that pops out like this.
Yeah, it's a bizarre series. I mean, the great thing is it's inventive in what it does, and it adopts other animation styles, so it's never dull, which is great. Because I mean, the problem with something like this is it can get really old really quickly, and it manages to just about stay fresh. I think once you get about halfway through it, you might start to lag a bit. I know I did. But there's enough interesting stuff in there. There's a whole episode where they do it in the style of Leiji Matsumoto, if I remember rightly. And
episode 3.
So they really sort of went to town. There was a lot of love in it, and I think that's why people liked it, even if you didn't get the references, because I don't think a lot of people back then would have really known anything by Lee Matsumoto. But the style was cool, and it looked amazing, and it had all these little references that you could pick up if you were a fan, which is what makes it fun to go back and watch now. Because once you build up your sort of your library and your experience with anime, then you can start picking stuff out. I mean, perfect example is I've been watching the Limitless series again with my wife. And it came up to the episode that's the Ferris Bueller homage, and she's never seen the film. I'm sat there watching, you know what, we're turning this off. I'm putting Ferris Bueller on, we're coming back to it. Because none of this will make any sense to you if you don't know what this is. I mean, it was still fairly enjoyable if you didn't get, who Ed Rooney was, or, Sloane and Cameron and all that kind of stuff. But it's not the same. And I think you can enjoy Excel Saga for the insane, just madness that it is. But if you do know what it's referencing, then it just gets better. So it's nice for that. You can go back and watch it and, oh, now I know what that's referencing. So it's good. It ages well. You can't say that about every anime, but this one I think does. And it's a good one. If you've been a fan for a long time, you haven't watched it in ages, it's worth going back to see it again because you'll pick up so much more from it. And I think also there's a lot. It's led to, probably not directly, but you look at a lot of stuff now, like you've got Panty Stocking, which I would say spiritually is a good kind of successor to Excel Saga, just in how mad that is. It's very sort of, two women going out and just doing insanity things. And you've had all sorts of cool stuff like that come through, but it's almost got a cat art style to it as well. So you look at things like maybe, I don't watch a lot of this stuff. Rick and Morty.
Oh, yeah.
You see Rick and Morty. There's DNA of Excel Saga in Rick and Morty. They're taking cultural references and just making, stupid jokes out of it. It's insane. And then it resets itself. You never seem to, there's never any sort of long lasting repercussions, or doesn't seem to be. And it's the same with this. In fact, it's a feature of the show that they reset the timeline on several occasions. There's like this intelligence looking over the whole thing and sort of just going, no, back to the start. It's like, oh, okay. So that's kind of cool. So it does have, it's very winky, noddy kind of thing. I mean, I made some notes. There's just too much to sort of try and remember from this series. But I mean, the director makes an appearance in it.
Nabashin, who takes cues from Lupin III.
That's right.
Cast of Cagliostro. I'm not too familiar with the Arsène Lupin character. But I'm aware they dressed the same and they had the sort of Afro-style haircut, which made it more surreal and hilarious because it's like, why is he appearing out of nowhere? And then a lot of the other characters as well are very much question marks with the pea shoes that almost look like a Pikachu type of character. But when they get kicked, their faces look like Go 13. I didn't know what any of that meant when I saw that, but I picked up on it as the years went by, and I thought, okay, they're referencing Go 13. And then there was that one character that doesn't say anything. His titles in kanji, and it's all things like that. You can't see his eyes. That was a little bit. The whole show was actually more or less a mistake, as they like to parody on the internet. I think the anime was not a mistake. Miyazaki, it's a viral meme on the internet. But getting back to it, the reason why I got into Excel Saga was mainly by accident. It aired on Ratch TV in January 2007, so it'll be almost 18 years since I last saw it.
Yeah.
I saw Full Metal Alchemist.
Well, that's 4 years after it first arrived in the UK. It was 2003, I think, when they released it. So you caught it on a quite late showing.
I did there. Well, you have to bear in mind, in 2003, I was not watching anime or reading manga because it just wasn't appeal to me, really. Most of the people at that time, they were in like Beyblade and Yu-Gi-Oh! And I just couldn't get into it. Like Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon, that was just all sort of, it felt like white noise. I didn't even like Samurai Jack, and that was kind of anime inspired, but I was more into like your Dexter's Labs and Johnny Bravo's and Simpsons. But as I,
it does. You do miss a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I absolutely understand how it's. I mean, it took me a while to get into it, but yeah, it's an acquired taste.
Oh yes, absolutely. But as I got older, obviously, because I got into anime initially through Daft Punk. Yeah, that Matsumoto connection, because episode 3 referenced like the blonde-haired lady that they were sort of referencing on the music video for Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. Well, they call it Galaxy Express 999.
That's it.
Yep. And
Yeah.
I was like, hold on a minute. And then I got into the Ghiblis, and I became, horny teenager who was obsessed with checking out all these DVD covers and stuff that had suggestive artwork, like you see with Ghost in the Shell, Elfen Lied, or those darkness hentais, which are the very few hentais that are legally permissible to sell on UK market. Don't ask why. And then, your regular stuff like Afro Samurai, which was the first 18-rated work I ever owned on DVD. I did see Cowboy Bebop on some rare occasions, just based on hearsay, and I saw the Cowboy Bebop movie. I got a DVD copy of it from HMV. Good times. The year after I saw XL Saga and Madlax, Elfen Lied, Najka, Mezzo, and all those great classics, but XL, weirdly enough, aired on Rapture TV, which was a channel that was dedicated to electronic music. So it was obviously a perfect storm, because I'm obsessed with like your Boards of Canadas and Aphex Twins and Chemical Brothers, Fatboy Slim. But I wasn't obsessed with Tiesto and David Guetta. I can't stand them too. But they aired the anime, and initially when they showed anime, they had Full Metal Alchemist. I saw like the last set of episodes of that. It was good. I actually prefer the original FMA over FMA Brotherhood.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people will send me death threats for that, but I don't care. But XL Saga was the show that made me click in my head by accident. This was not meant to be seen, but I saw it because, hey, it's a Japanese cartoon. It's got that controversial episode at the very end of the show.
Yeah, the too far by half one. Yes, it's which by today's standards probably seems quite tame.
Well,
might still be quite edgy. It's I did sort of catch up a little bit on a few episodes, and I can't remember. I did actually watch that one. Yeah. Basically, the world is flooded by blood at the end of it, thanks to Hayat. It was very, very bizarre.
And let's not forget Ryan's here!
Happiness! It's wonderful!
But of course, it all leads into Pony Pony Poemi, which is the next work by the director with the same energy. So, and that one I was a bit more familiar with because that one I actually owned, so I'd watched that one a few times. But yeah, it's a funny old thing is XL Saga, because it's got, again, lots of elements that people can latch onto. It's funny, it's sexy, it's almost got that Pinky in the Brain, let's take over the world kind of energy to it. And you sometimes wonder, did this have more of an effect on things? I mean, like, look at Elfen Lied and that Netflix horror show we talked about that you hate. Oh God, it's just scary.
I don't like Stranger Things.
That's the one, thank you. Yes, the Stranger Things, which was essentially just Elfen Lied, and they just took that and reworked it. And when it was immediately discovered online and everybody was pointing it out, like, well, you'd think anybody would notice. So you do wonder how many people saw XL Saga and moved into animation, started importing that DNA into their own projects and some of that madness, because there's quite a few, I'd say, Western animations that have got that level of just sort of madness in them. And as I say, the Rick and Morty style things. I'm trying to remember the name of it now, but there was one where there was a pilot who was in space by himself. David Tennant was in it as the bad guy. Name escapes me, but again, I seem to remember that. When that came out, I really enjoyed it. And it's the same kind of stupid humor, thick protagonists that are trying to do something that's well beyond their capabilities, but are endlessly enthusiastic about it. I do think that probably people saw XL Saga and went into animation, because it's been 20 years now, hasn't it? So
it came out in 1999, but for us in the UK, it came out like in 2003. And if I was correct, they aired it on like the Sci-Fi channel. I wasn't really watching Sci-Fi back then. No. I know as the years went on, along with its sister station Bravo, they used to air certain anime and Adult Swim type programs on it. And the closest thing I can think of animation-wise to XL Saga is probably Space Ghost Coast to Coast. which I was obsessed with as a child. I didn't know it was supposed to be for adults. I watched it because it just was on Cartoon Network after Dexter's Lab.
Yeah.
I didn't get it because it just was random, but I liked it for the soundtrack. In the same way, I like XL Saga for the soundtrack. I'll mention about the MXQ stuff in just a little bit, but I would argue on a live action level, XL Saga shares quite a bit in common with Everything Everywhere All at Once and Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah,
Kung Fu Hustle as well in terms of
Yeah, no, it's got that manic energy to it. I mean, I loved Kung Fu Hustle when that came out. I absolutely adored that film. I've got it on a DVD somewhere in a drawer in the house, but I haven't watched it in a few years. But yeah, you reminded me I should go watch that again. But no, there was something about it at the time. Even at the time, it was different to other things that were out. We didn't have to wait too long for Puna Puna Puni Meal. I think that was a couple of years later we got that. But I remember watching Scramble Wars, which was the SD sort of wacky races style anime about all the art mix series like Gal Force, Bubblegum Crisis, Genesis Survivor Gaiath, and it's just this insane race across the desert with all these characters in sort of like super deformed style, and that's really insane as well. And I love that show just because anything with more Bubblegum Crisis in it was fine by me. But yeah, the Japanese have got this really mad style of humor. They love slapstick, they love wordplay and all this kind of thing. And there's big differences actually between the English dub and the original, which I'd made a note on. So let me try and pronounce this correctly. So there we go. Is it Katharina Mitsushi? Yeah, that sounds about right. The Japanese.
She voices Sailor Moon character, I think.
Yeah. I think you might be right there. In this, however, she was so fast with the delivery that she was able to ad-lib and keep up with the mouth movement because they'd put it all in for her to say it, but she was so fast that she either ad-libbed or they wrote extra dialogue for her to deliver so they could fit it all into the frame. And in the sort of Western dub of it, she's more of a kind of vacuous Valley Girl type. So it's a very different show depending on how you watch it. And I thought that was really interesting because I like the Japanese version. Just because that really turns up the manicness of it, just because she's so quick and so rah, 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 bang, things blow up. And then you watch things from, hey, this is really, it's just like, wow, it's a really different style of delivery, and see what you're going for and why you've done this dumb blonde kind of approach to it. But I really kind of like that Japanese delivery. So you're watching two completely different shows depending on whether you watch it subbed or dubbed. Certainly for the comedy styling of it. And that always stuck out to me. Even at the time, I seem to remember reviewing it many, many years ago, and I'd watched both versions. I was like, yeah, I don't know which one I like more. I kind of like the fact that I can watch it without reading, and I get, the comedy of it, and they've changed some of the jokes to be a little bit more Western friendly, I think. But the Japanese one is just turned up to 11. It's amazing. It's just like, I was like, oh, this is great. I didn't know anyone could speak that fast. So it's a really good show, and you can watch it either way. But I definitely recommend, if you've only seen it one way, then you should really try watching it the other, just to see if there's anything else that you can get out of it, because it is a show you can watch multiple times and get more than one experience from it, and certainly the dub aspect of it is very much a part of that. And I think some of the jokes later on, the way that the show evolved, was down entirely to her delivery. So it's quite interesting to sort of see how it does get more manic, but it's because they're trying to accommodate the talent that they've got in the studio, and they think, well, we can do a lot more in a much shorter time frame, so let's just really make it insane. So I like that part of the development of it, is that they did over time. They thought, wow, we got something really cool here. I think even the opening and the ending song were written 5 minutes before the deadline. So it does have that kind of mad energy to it, and I do like that element. It does feel almost like Monty Python-esque kind of just coming out of nowhere kind of stuff. These kind of...
I would say so too. For the people who are a bit peculiar about what it entails, if you know what the credits are, well, I'll give the spoiler away. It's essentially the
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs.
And it's just so random. I've never seen the ending credits that involve a dog singing, let alone opening credits, which sounds like something out of a New Jack Swing song. New Jack Swing was a popular subgenre of R&B back in the early 90s. That somehow features Hyatt coughing up on the microphone like... I just thought it was absolutely random. I had that ringtone for so many years on my original orange phone that I got back in 2007 to show how much of a badass I was. Unfortunately, everyone at the school I was at didn't get what I was talking about, and that was not a problem for me because I liked it nonetheless, and it makes me nostalgic. Just for you, like maybe around 1.5 makes you nostalgic. I know I didn't really get into trouble for this one like I did with Ghost in the Shell or Elfen Lied, but I was very fearful that if I saw episode 26, which they aired uncut, weirdly enough, at 8:30 at night, that I probably would be told you were not allowed to watch anime ever again.
It has the full bingo card of offensive material in it, but that's what they wanted to do. They didn't want it to air on television. They wanted it to go into the DVD so people would buy it. So it's always a little bit, and it's a weird comparison to make, but it's also like the end of Evangelion of the original TV series when they made the ending so horrendous that the TV station was like, we're not airing this. And that's why we got the original ending that we did, which is just like still frames and voiceover because they didn't have time or the budget for anything else. And I can having seen End of Evangelion, I can understand that because I found it really hard to watch. The flamethrowers that they were using on the female operators I was just like, oh god, this is really. I couldn't have watched that on television. I don't like watching it in the film. I just find it upsetting because it's just like it's really hyper violent. But I think with Excel Saga, because of the humorous element of it, you can kind of get over it to a degree. As I say, there are some things that you just couldn't do now. That one character, the scientist guy, is obviously a character you just wouldn't do it. It's not worth it. It'd never get translated now. And I can kind of understand why, but things change over time. Tastes change. I think culture changes. So that's and in this case probably for the better. So yeah, I think there's certain elements of it that are a product of its time.
Oh, absolutely. It proudly wears the 15 certificate on its sleeve because of that last episode. Even though the majority of episodes are sort of at the 12 level, which actually caught me a little bit by surprise because even though UK Ofcom standards require you can't show certain things before 9 o'clock, even the early episodes that I saw, like, certificate 12 by the BBFC, some of them even had the F word. And I was like, I've never really heard the F word in an anime or an animation really that much. So that was kind of a bit shocking to see Excel saying, fuck you, or I love you so fucking much, or doing this.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just that energy that it had. But I suppose it gets away with being edgy, or its whole purpose is to be edgy. That's why you watch it. It's a bit like Beavis and Butthead. You just want to see what they're going to do next. And it works. It's a good show for that. But it's a hard one if somebody's never seen anime before or they're fairly new to it. It's not a show you want to start with. I think people watch, if this is what anime is about, that's basically what Shinkai and Ghibli are for.
Absolutely, though. I mean, if I was to introduce anyone to something that's a little bit more on the safe grounds, am I weird to say I would recommend Mezzo DSA?
Well, it's a bit violent, but I can say it's not bad. It's a good thriller.
I mean, not the hentai OVA Mezzo Forte. That's really pushing it, but the TV series is a bit more.
Some anime. Let's watch porn together. See what you think. I know what you mean. No, I think Mezzo the originals. Again, what did I used to show people? I mean, again, it depends on the time period of what I would show people. Because Tenchi Muyo was one that I used to show people, but that's got loads of nudity in it. But it's for comedic purposes or just practical purposes. Because in Japan, that's the culture. I remember my first trip to Japan with James. I'd only known the guy 3 months, and then I'm naked in a pool with him in Japan. I remember remarking on it at the time, saying, "This is a turn up for the books. I haven't even known each other that long." But it's just that you go to a public bath and you're all naked and stuff, and you frighten all the Japanese people because you're two white men walking into a business hotel that doesn't have any foreigners in it, and they're all sort of looking up very nervously. So hi guys. So yeah, that was very interesting as an experience. But in Tenchi Muyo, they go to a bath, the Nonsen episode. Well, a lot of anime have them. But for us as Westerners looking at that, we think, holy, wow, this is really weird. And that's what I loved about anime. It was the cultural differences. And that's why I love Ranma, because you sort of saw how people lived in Japan in the 80s, you know, tatami mats, the short tables, all this sort of thing. And you think, wow, this is like a completely different world. It's like watching sci-fi. But it's just another, and that's really what drew me into it, was just the fact that you've got all these differences. They're still like us, but they're very much not like us at the same time. So when you're watching anime, you were seeing something really that felt special in a way, like a window into another world. And I'm not sure what that world would be if what you saw was Excel Saga.
No, I mean, it's a wild card at that. And like you said, you have to be a bit familiar with some of the humor that's being referenced. I mean, I didn't know very much whatever they were talking about, sort of making jokes about Area 88, which is like a Top Gun version of anime, or...
That's right, it was huge in Japan.
Trust you, because you're more of a veteran in this department. I mean, for me, my first anime being Daft Punk's One More Time, that would probably get me laughed at certain corners. And I know they've done a 4K release of Interstellar 555. There's too many fives. But I advise anyone who's watching this right now, don't pay money to watch a 4K release. You can watch all the music videos of that Daft Punk anime called Discovery on YouTube in its like 360 or 480p pixel rate. Just be nostalgic. Don't watch it in 4K because it kind of takes in cheap. It's trying too hard.
You're not the only one. I think Anime News Network gave it a pretty critical review, just saying it's 4K by people that don't know how to do 4K. So
that's what I heard too.
Yeah, I take their word for it. I have been far too busy over the last couple of weeks to sort of really look into it. But that headline did hit my radar, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, because I kind of want to see it, but equally the version in my head it's perfect. I don't want to ruin it. I mean, there's certain films I saw years ago that I don't really want to rewatch because, how I remember them. The Labyrinth was one, but my wife's massively into it, so she made me watch it again. And I thought, oh, it's not as good as I remember. I wish I and it's still.
Well, I mean, that happened with me when I saw Pocahontas, the Disney classic. It doesn't quite hold up like I originally saw it, and I thought it was so great, but now it's like I couldn't care less. Or Beetlejuice, which is the first 15 rated film I ever saw growing up. I just don't think Beetlejuice holds up quite that well. Even the sequel isn't as great as everyone says it is, but
I haven't seen. Yeah, but I will. The first one I watched with my wife, because I said, we might go see the second one at the cinema. So we watched it, and she turned around, what was that crap? I was like, okay, it's not for you then, obviously. I mean, Beetlejuice doesn't even show up for like the first hour.
Well, one could argue that. You kind of have to know the sort of lore behind it. But I just reminded myself, because of Beetlejuice and to some extent The Mask, the Jim Carrey film, and Drop Dead Fred, what I call the trinity of crazy sort of PG-13 type comedies. XL Saga may have been influenced to some extent by those films. I don't know, but there's a insane sort of madcap vibe about those works as well as XL Saga.
I mean, again, Tex Avery would be a good sort of example of kind of madcap sort of Western animation that might have tipped XL Saga, or tipped into XL Saga in some form. But it depends. I mean, I don't know enough about the director to know what his influences were, but I know he likes madcap comedy, obviously, because that's his forte.
Definitely.
But I think there's a shared sort of humour that's there, but it's quite a specific taste. I don't think XL Saga is for everybody. If you like madcap stuff, great. It doesn't have a huge amount going on outside of that that might draw you in. So when we talk about other anime that have got like elements of comedy or drama or pathos or whatever else, or great music, like Samurai Champloo, which is a good mix of all these different things. XL Saga is pretty one note in that sense. It's like it's mad all the time, and it might reference some things, but you might not know what they are. But it's enjoyable. But after a while, it's the same shtick, and that was why a lot of people I knew sort of like got about 10 episodes in and went, "Does anything actually happen in this show?" It's like, no, that's specifically the point of it, is that nothing happens in this show. Like Seinfeld, it's the whole point is nothing happens. And if it does happen, it gets reset at the end of it so that nothing happens.
But that's its asset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when I was growing up, I didn't like TV shows that had a continual story thread. The thing that was great about The Simpsons and Dexter's Lab was that each episode was kind of different from the next.
Yeah.
There was no sort of continual thread. And that made it easier for me because, I was kind of a bit hyper already, obsessed with Jammy Dodgers and Fox's Party Rings and watching Cartoon Network all the time. And those are Western cartoons, so there was kind of an easy transition with XL Saga because the humor, in my opinion, is actually kind of Western friendly. Unlike, let's say, I don't know, like Shin-Chan. Yeah. I like some episodes of Shin-Chan, the one that's the vulgar dub that they aired in America with all the swearing and sex jokes, not the Fox Kids one that you got in the UK. But that's just from my perspective on it. But I would say for anyone who might feel like XL Star is a bit too much of a step too far, I will say this: it's not Elfen Lied.
No,
you won't
that's
get
true.
dirty looks from people thinking you are some disgusting monster for watching it. Unless you watch episode 26 and you're probably through a curveball. Just only watch the first 25 episodes. Don't go above your station, and also avoid Puni Puni Poemi, which I'll mention in just a little bit. And as well, I know some people might say, oh, it's probably got some offensive, it's not politically correct. It's actually one of the few Japanese cartoons I'm aware of that actually has a black character or Afro-Latino.
So this is what Japan is really like, Papa?
That is right. This is your papa's second home.
Oh, don't exaggerate. You're just cheap foreign labor, mi corazon.
It was like the Pedro character who says, my sexy wife, Pedro will never see anything. No! I was like, I didn't know, that I was anime that, all the characters were either white or Japanese.
Yeah, it is a rarity. I remember Bubblegum Crisis episode 8 being notable for that because the police chief of AD Police is a black guy and his niece comes to the station and the entire episode revolves around his niece and one of the Night Sabers being Nene. They've got a gay police officer in it. So they cover a lot of bases in Bubblegum Crisis very early on. This is like late 80s. So, because I wrote an article years ago about somebody was going, something about anime just basically not having enough representation in it. Now, if you don't think there's representation, you're just not looking hard enough. There's a gay couple in Sailor Moon, for God's sake. You actually look for the stuff. True, black characters are more of a rarity, but they do appear. I mean, look at Cowboy Bebop. There's plenty of racial difference in that. There's lots of representation. Not always positive, I have to admit. But it's. Japan is a monoculture. This is the thing that people have to say. Unless you go there and you are surrounded by everyone else who's Japanese. I have been that guy in a small village in Japan where people have yelled Gaijin at me. Just sort of pointing, Gaijin! Hello, I'm just passing through. But it is that kind of thing. They haven't got this Western sort of mixing sort of thing. But we've gone through a frenzy of that in the last sort of 30, 40 years. It wasn't that varied in the UK, not in living memory, but Japan has never gone that way. They've never had any interest in sort of immigration or anything like that. It's Japan, it's the Japanese, and it's led to problems. I mean, they have issues with reproduction and an aging population, and they're now trying to encourage people to come into Japan, including selling houses for like 20 grand that would be like mansions over here. But you have to move your family over there and work the land or whatever it is they want you to do. So things have changed that way. So you are now starting to see more of these characters coming into things. I mean, even cyberpunk edge runners, there's quite a bit of ethnic mixing into that, but it's cyberpunk. So, it's all about mixing, technology and culture and all that kind of stuff. So we are seeing more and more of it, and we will. But it doesn't say it doesn't exist in previous things. I mean, even stuff like, Nadia, the Blue Water, the main character in that is not Japanese. So
exactly.
Hugely popular. And so, you do get all this stuff. And the only time it gets confusing is when you get those gals that like to wear lots of tan, like Nagatoro. And it's, you just think, is she actually Asian? Oh, yes, it just wearing all that body tan and stuff, and you see the kind of like the underwear marks and things where she's not got the tan on. And yeah, it's interesting for that. But yeah, as I say, it's there is that kind of range in that Japanese animation, and it got there a lot earlier than it ever did in Western animation. That's the thing. Certainly, if you're talking about LGBTQIA plus, I lose track, so I'm old, but basically all of that stuff is in Japanese anime, and quite a lot of it. I mean, like
Revolutionary Girl Utena had a lesbian and an interracial relationship between like a Black or South Asian lady and a Japanese woman, which probably sounds like the worst kind of porno you can imagine, but it worked. And I'm sure people nowadays, it might actually go against what people might think. They, instead of saying, "Oh, that's inclusive," they might say, "This is the woke agenda. They're trying to brainwash your kids to turn them queer."
Well,
You'll be surprised at what you hear on the internet. It's full of right-wing people.
I spend a lot of time there. I get asked about woke a lot, and the way I've always defined it is woke is when the representation overtakes the story. If there's not a story, or if the representation is just overwhelms it, then that's probably what woke is. It's trying to get a message across rather than a story. But look at something like The Expanse. Probably one of the most diverse casts of all sorts of things. There's polygamy in it. There's all sorts of things in that show, and everyone loves it. It's not woke. None of that stuff matters in terms of, look at this. This is better than what you are. This is amazing. And it's just like, no, this is the world, and it's the world that we're in. So you don't have to make a big deal of it. Just have it there, in the background, all around. Major characters. The character, the drummer, who is like the most popular character in that show, is a bisexual. She's got like several lovers at a time, and she's like this badass space captain. Everybody loves her. It's like, so it's not the character. That's not what woke is. Woke is just when it's overwhelmingly, this is, look at this, and don't, this is good. Don't, everything else is bad. I don't. That for my generation is just like, what you want about? I went to school with a Mr. T lunchbox. Don't tell me about inclusion. My favorite character was the black guy on the A team. And everybody in the school playground thought he was the coolest thing ever. Race didn't come into it. He was just a really cool character, and we all loved him. Same with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I don't know anyone that didn't watch that show. I wanted Uncle Phil to be my uncle. I thought he was the coolest guy ever. That episode where he hustles those guys in the bar, fantastic. And that had loads of messaging in it. They talk about the stuff they went on all the time, the marches, and they're talking to Will and Carlton about how they need to appreciate how far things have come and all that sort of stuff. I thought it was great, because I was learning stuff about history. I remember going and reading up on it. So that's fine. But it's just when it becomes just overbearing, and I think that's what I try and say to people is, look, and it's not necessarily a problem. Inclusion isn't the woke part; it's the story part of it. There's no story there, then all you're being told is, look at this. And it's like, well, what about it? It's give me a story that makes me root for these characters.
Well, thankfully, in Excel Saga's case, because it's so madcap and out of the ordinary, there's no sort of hidden agenda behind it, really.
No.
It's not like I'm going to bring up Elfen Lied again, because that had a message. That was a metaphor for discrimination. People who are trans or of different ethnic groups probably can read into the message and say, I'm just like New. I'm like the Diclonius. Excel Saga, you're just, watching, having a beer, or like a mochi. They're these ice cream snacks, like a mochi, and just like. But as far as the queer content is concerned, it's actually quite possibly gay. There's lesbianism in several scenes, including episode 17, which I thought, should I be watching this? Because for millennials, I think people have short memories, but 2006, 2007 was still quite homophobic and showing kind of lesbianism in that situation with like the Rob and Matsu Unit 2 and XL kind of implied to get a bit frisky was like, oh, that was a bit rich. And I thought, oh, am I going to get trouble for watching that? Because people are still quite homophobic. But yeah, and then, on episode 26, that was pretty much just gratuitous. I mean, that was even the first time I saw an erection in anything. Like, it was like bouncing back and forth. It was the character who wanted to get into Excel masquerading as Hyatt because they had a body switch in her pants, and I was like, whoa, I'm probably gonna, oh, you naughty bastard. That was the closest thing to hentai I was watching in '07, just so you know, because I didn't have stuff like DeviantArt or 4chan. I wouldn't, no.
The splendors of the modern internet, yes. The funny thing, I was talking about somebody about DeviantArt recently. I've got art up on DeviantArt back when it was an art platform. And I went back on it recently to go and see, oh, look, I've got a like on it. And I went back and what has happened to DeviantArt? It's all porn. Not that delete account. It's weird. And all I've got is some like old drawings when I was like 16, 17, something like that I'd uploaded. And it's just like, Jesus, what has happened to this? And it has, the whole culture's changed. Everything sort of changes over time. But in terms of sort of like your representation and stuff, I don't really care. I just want to see something that entertains me. I don't care if somebody's gay or straight. My daughter's godparents are a gay couple. It doesn't bother me. They're really lovely people, and we play board games with them quite often. So, that's fine. But you look at Excel Saga, it's trying to be offensive. And the way it thinks at the time you be offensive is you put lesbian content into something, along with lots of other things. And if you choose to get offended by it, fine. But nowadays, it's not offensive at all. It's quite natural. In fact, it's pretty much every AAA computer game that you can play now has got a gay main character in it, or a gay female character, or whatever. That's fine, but I just want a good story out of it. And Excel Saga is funny, so that's fine. That's all I really care about.
That's pretty much the only mission it provides. I mean, it's not like Ghost in the Shell where you have to contemplate the role of technology in society, or Princess Mononoke has issues related to the environment.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that with Excel or Puni Puni Poemi. No way. But you might get it with an MXQ record, which I'll bring up because if it wasn't for Excel Saga, my music name would not exist. And I'm very proud to go by its namesake because the M in MXQ stands for macrocosmic. And it's a reference to a character who's called the Great Will of the Macrocosm, which was like this little sphere galaxy thing that kept trying to do like Dos Ex Machina situations when everything went tits up. Mm-hmm. And it worked. And it was like, oh no, I'll save the world. Don't cry, Excel. I'll save you. And then everything goes back to normal, and then she has like a bit of an affair with Pedro because he misses his sexy wife because I died falling from construction site. No! That was one of the big gags in his Pedro saying, no! That's one of my favorite phrases of all time is when characters say no in cartoons. They've done it a lot on Simpsons as well.
Yeah, past series 13, I haven't kept up with Simpsons, but I used to love it when I did watch it. I didn't have Sky, so I had to buy it. But yeah, I just that character, the universe, the macrocosm, that was unique to the anime. So they actually did the sort of Marvel MCU thing before they did, because the original artist of the manga and Watanabe decided that there'd be separate universes. Same thing, just separate timelines. So they could do what they wanted, basically. And they reference it in the show all the time, which is kind of cool, because you think, well, I can still go and read the manga. But the manga, because it was coming out more slowly than the anime was, started to then influence the manga, which is quite rare. But it was interesting to see how the manga started to change and become a lot faster and, more manic, because that was what people responded to with the anime. So that's kind of cool to sort of see it go back on itself, which is a very Excel Saga thing to do.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's very meta, and that's one of its strongest assets. To people, where people say it's a bit copying like Family Guy, or maybe Family Guy copied Excel. That's for people to decide. But the point is, one of its strong suits for a lot of people was those first set of minutes that says, "I, Koshi Ricto, hereby accept the Excel Saga anime into X." Or Y, which is like a genre or style that's trying to emulate from past anime or films of that sort. Like the first episode was just random, Number 2, that was sort of like a space adventure, that kind of riff on Galaxy Express 999, particularly at the end. Number 3 was Rambo. There was one episode that, of all things, took the piss out of Fist of the North Star. And I've never seen Fist of the North Star, but I knew what the joke was because it had people's heads exploding and there was like muscle Mad Max men in the desert. It was hilarious.
I saw it. The only thing that shocked me about Fist of the North Star was that one of the baddies was voiced by Peter Cullen, which of course is Optimus Prime, which was like my hero as a kid. And as soon as I heard his voice, it completely took me out of the whole thing. I was just like, what the hell's Optimus Prime doing here? It's so weird. But I did see it. I've only seen that film once. But yeah, it's just a ridiculous, ultra-violent, gory, Mad Max rip-off, basically. And it's weird because at that time, when it first came out, that's what anime was. All of it was that. There wasn't anything else. Maybe Project A-ko, that was it. But everything was hyper, and that's how it was marketed. Genocyber, that's horrendous to watch. It's disgusting. It's got horrible biological bits in it there. But it's everything we got originally was just awful. Then you started getting these fringe people like Kiseki releasing Macross 2, and that's what anime really was like, as opposed to all the stuff we'd been force-fed for the first 3 or 4 years. So by the time you sort of fast forward to 2003 and we get Excel Saga, people in my generation anyway have got a better understanding of what anime is. But for people just getting into it, if they'd been brought in or they knew the stuff that I knew, it was completely bizarre to see anything like that. But people of your vintage, that was just what anime was like, because that was what was on telly and it was what you could buy down the shop. So that must be what anime is. So it's really strange how it's affected people's perceptions of the entire medium. And I know loads of people that love Excel Saga. And it was huge when it came out. Everybody loved it. It was like one of the anime. And, I enjoyed it for what it was. For me, I think it's one of those shows, it's best watched once a week, which was the original format, because then you're not getting overloaded. I think it's a very hard show to binge, because after a while, it's just too much. There's too much going on. It's like a toddler being overwhelmed by too much sort of sensory overload. So for me personally, I watch it. I know some other people say, you know what, we'll watch that one next week. And when I went to the anime club that I used to join, the Yorkshire Area Team Anime, so Yatta, very, very original, that was one of the shows that they put on. But we also watched Berserk. So there was a slight change in sort of style. Escaflowne was another one that we watched. So we got all sorts of varied things. And then Excel Saga was just like the madcap one that you watched that was just bizarre. But you look at things like Magical Shopping Arcade of Binabashi. That's very Excel Saga. There's a great scene in that where they meet an Elvis guy. It's like they have the American episode. And the Elvis guy just starts yelling fuck millions of times. And I was just on the floor laughing at it because it just came out of nowhere. It was obscene sort of language, and it was just fantastic. And that immediately when I saw that, I was put in mind of Excel Saga. So it definitely stuck. It wasn't something that I watched every year religiously, but it was something that I remembered. I thought that is an Excel Saga moment. That's the sort of thing that they would put in there. And so you do see that, and I don't know if that was something that because Binabashi was well after I think Excel Saga, but I don't know if a bit of that DNA had kind of sort of filtered into there, or if it's just that Japanese style of humor. But I did really enjoy it. I thought that's a very cool thing, because the bad guys were wearing Sentai outfits, so there's another bit of Japanese culture that if you watch Power Rangers and you knew about that genre, then that was in Excel Saga as well. So everything was parodied. There's loads of stuff that you could just pick up and go, oh, I know what they're doing with that. And the more other anime you watch, the more you get out of Excel Saga. So, again, go back and rewatch it, because you'll get so much more out of it on your second, third, fourth watches. It's almost like something you should watch every 5 years.
I kind of do that anyways.
Well, there you go. See, so that's a good thing. After a while, of course, it came out, late 90s, so there's only so much stuff of references you'll get, but things like Sentai are still going now, so even if you didn't know the series that were around at that time, you'd have picked up on it since then, because of course these things are still going. And I say with Leiji Matsumoto, again, still stuff of his going around. They had he designed a boat in Japan. Again, I've been on that boat. It's really cool. It's like this slightly underwater boat designed by Leiji Matsumoto. It's an amazing thing. I don't know if it's still going, but I remember going on that. And again, I was thinking of Interstellar and all these sort of things. And these cultural touchstones are all there in Excel Saga, and you could write a PhD on it if you really wanted to. There's so much depth to it, even though it's incredibly stupid. So it's and the best humor is, I mean, Spike Milligan was incredibly, all his humor was stupid, but he was an incredibly smart guy. And I think the people behind Excel Saga were probably very smart, but they knew how to do stupid in a way that was, could be consumed. So it's quite a almost autistic anime. There's just so much stuff in it that you just think, wow, that's you just absorbed all this stuff and then just spat it out as this amazing sort of just insanity with so much depth, but used for such stupid ends. Which again, the series, the whole thing is trying to take over the world, but badly.
I find those assets, as far as I'm concerned, kind of lost my train of thought there. But you make some very
talking about being stupid, so that might be one of my assets.
No, but you made some valid points, because the show doesn't really have much of a message or anything important to say. It's just quite random, really. And I'm just glad that it existed. It came out, as far as I'm concerned, in the year that everything broke. Not broke money, although anime was still very expensive. I mean, like 3 episodes for £20 on HMV. Shoot me now. That's why when I got Volume 1, I had to get it in America, and it was like about $6.99 USD. I got it at Amoeba Records in Los Angeles because I couldn't afford to get it at HMV at the time. But I got Volume 6, which had the episode 26. The year after, I got the Volume 2 DVD at Amoeba Records in LA. I got the Volume 6 one at HMV in Milton Keynes. That must have cost like £8, but I was more than happy to get it because there was this dangerous, lethal anime of that particular episode that you shouldn't watch, because if I was caught trying to get Elfen Lied or Afro Samurai or The Darkness or even Requiem from the Darkness, which is not even related to those hentai works. I was a dangerous person. But nowadays, I can only imagine if I was that same age again. But now, who knows what kind of crazy shit I would have been watching, because everything, you can check it out on your phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's too easy. Yeah. I don't like Crunchyroll. I don't like how convenient it is. That's why I'm only going to stick with old people. Here's the weird thing. Someone said, I don't know if this was about XL or Elfin, but they said boomer anime. And I guess we're in that zone at this point by Generation Z and Gen Alpha kids that are the kind of titles we like are now considered boomer anime. I think that's crazy. But then again, they're kind of right, because I can't relate to Demon Slayer or Gintama. What's that one that was like called that time there was slime in the toilet and I was reincarnated.
I was reincarnated into a slime. You know what? I like the manga of that. I never got into the anime, and the reason I like the manga was because at the end of every, because the reason that he can change his shape is he takes on some properties of a dragon.
The new anime to me is a bit like a foreign language. If it's not French, I'm probably not too invested in it. Although I did see Kizu Monogatari Koyomi that because it was an 18. I was too young to see Waltz with Bashir and Perfect Blue when they came out in cinemas, and I wasn't even born when Fritz the Cat was a thing. So I wanted to see an 18-rated animation on the big screen. There's quite a lot of people inside the screening. No kids snuck into it. It's also like people our age or younger, so like 20s and 30s. Some people, some 40-somethings. And I was like, I fulfilled a lifetime goal. I'm a bit weird like that with cinema going. I will like to see films and stuff based on controversy alone. It's why I saw Sausage Party. I wanted to see an adult cartoon on the big screen and see how people would react to talking food, saying fuck, shit, cunt, and masturbating and getting into orgies. And God knows what type of mischievous stuff gone on screen, because I was too young to see South Park, Big Along and Uncut in the cinema, and Team America World Police.
Yeah.
So that was sort of my, what's the word? Making up for it. Same with Akira and Ghost in the Shell. I couldn't see those when they initially came out. But I'll go and jump onto Puni Puni Poemi, which I know is relayed within the X-Men Saga universe.
Yep, they did an OVA that had a crossover, if I remember rightly. So yes, very much so.
I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but I was very fearful of watching that for years. And you want to know why? I'll let you take a guess.
Well, there's so many reasons. There's very young protagonists. There's the only thing that put me off it.
It's censorship issues it faced in New Zealand. It was banned for like 17 years.
Was it really?
Even though it was legal to buy in the UK and US, it was banned in New Zealand. And I was like, don't go there. And that happened when I stopped watching anime. I was just watching regular stuff. So I was fearful. But now, when I saw it, I was like, okay, now I see what all the fuss was about. And I saw it again after the ban was repealed. And it got an R16 in New Zealand for violence, sexual content, cruelty, and content that may disturb. And I thought, now I get in on the joke a lot more. I've been more worried about people watching Elfin Lied and Speedgrapher more so than any of them, because I mean, I've talked about Elfin a lot, but have you seen Speedgrapher?
Speedgrapher, yes, yeah. That's all about kink and upper class, debauchery.
It is one of the most perverted cartoons I've ever seen that isn't sort of what you would call H anime. We'll just use it as code for H, but it's like, bad taste in my mouth.
I didn't enjoy Speedgrapher at all. I found it quite disturbing, to be fair, but I'm quite sensitive to these things. I tend to stick to things that aren't too upsetting. I get sad if one of my favourite characters in Gundam dies, and that's about as vanilla a franchise as you can imagine. So when you get to the really extreme end of the stuff like Elfin Lied and to an extent Excel Saga and even Evangelion, when that got really dark, I find that hard to watch. But that's because I'm, soppy old git, and I see young people getting killed. It genuinely upsets me.
What about Shimoneta? I know that's kind of a comedy anime like Excel Saga, but it's a very sexual one. One of the gags involves one of the students using female ejaculation on her cookie, and she calls it love nectar.
You're going to know more about this because I don't think I've seen that one.
It's a great title. It's one of the few post-2010s anime I actually like, because I don't really like anything that was made after 2009. But that was an exception. Just coming with a warning, because it's very crude, but it's not, it's not The Darkness. It's not Mezzo Forte.
No.
But it's a great title as far as I'm concerned. But I thought to bring that one up because I thought, that might be a bit on stepping a little bit lines there. But I'm someone who's used to controversy, whichever way you look. I've seen Human Centipede 2. I've seen Clockwork Orange and Taxi Driver. In fact, let me tell you about Taxi Driver. That assassin guy who shot the health insurance CEO, it's going to make more people think that movie is a calling card. They're going to want to be like, yeah, I'm going to be Travis Bickle and say, talking to me? I don't see anyone. You talking to me?
Yeah, you can absolutely see it. I mean, it is quite disturbing in that sense. I mean, again, Clockwork Orange is one that I've long enjoyed. My father-in-law won't watch it. He's a big Kubrick fan, but that's the one film he refuses to watch. And it's the use of language in that film that I love. It's really interesting. And actually, once you get past the first, half hour, becomes a complete satire, and then it's a completely different film. All that hyper-violence at the beginning, and even the hyper-violence doesn't seem that violent now. There's the scene with the cat lady. I admit, being killed by a giant dildo, that's pretty far out there. But the other stuff is just fighting and stuff. I've seen far worse in mainstream films in terms of sort of like fighting violence than I ever saw in Clockwork Orange. But I think, and I might be corrected by some proper film buffs, but I think part of that was shot near Aylesbury, where I was mugged by a group of teenagers and left to die in an alleyway. So I know what that sort of urban decay is like. So I always found it super fascinating for that reason. But but we're going back, aren't we, to sort of like older films and older sentiments and how it applies to today. And you're right. People looking at the, those films, a lot of kids won't see them. And I'm 4 years from being 50, so I'm quite old now. And I know, but there are people now, they put references into, like, Ghostbusters 2016, terrible film. But they've got references in it to Scarface. Who's watching Ghostbusters 2016 that understands anything about Scarface? Who will even have seen it? No one.
The actors in question who starred in it, who were probably in their 40s and stuff, would have seen it when they were, university age or as teenagers. But I doubt any sort of like Gen Z. Is that what they call them nowadays? Like Gen Z, Gen Alpha?
I don't know. Well, it was Gen X, then Gen Z, and I think millennials. So that when you grew up. So I was born in 78, so I'm a latter-day generation. So I think Gen X goes up to 82, 88.
Thank you, Senior Hyatt. I'm looking forward to it. Wow, I guess the sensors were repressing Hatchon, too. She was holding a whole lot in. Yeah!